welcome back and thank you for checking out another episode of The Road to ARKAST. You know, this year's festival, like I've said before, is the third year in this podcast festival that we started back in 2022. So, this year is going to be incredible. And so on the road to ARKAST, we have been interviewing several personalities and podcasters and getting different points of view from people from around the world, around the country, and trying to learn. Let's learn how to be better podcasters, how to create better contents. And like I said before, this podcast festival that is coming up that we're preparing for with September 14th in Little Rock, September 16th at the Ron Robinson Theater, where we're taking over and doing a live Halloween show with horror directors and tarot readings and a few other crazy things we've got planned. And then November 14th through the 16th in Fayetteville, Arkansas at the Library Event Center there. And we're so excited to have that and to be partnered up with Experience Fayetteville this year. And to be bringing so many different voices and speakers from around the country and to help us learn how to be better at our craft and to push the podcast industry forward in states that have typically been forgotten about. Some of the flyover states. And so stopping in rather than flying over. In this episode, we're going to talk with Jaxson McLennan, who has a very unique and interesting story. I think his story kind of illustrates how there's a thread of interconnectedness between all podcasters, but there's also an original story in everybody who pursues this crazy industry of wide open anything goes, right? So Jaxson McLennan, we're going to talk to him, learn about his journey, why he traveled halfway across the world to pursue a career in the podcast industry.
Jaxson, thank you so much for being on the show today and being willing to talk about your expertise and your history in podcasting. So do you mind just giving us a little bit, a brief intro of who Jaxson McLennan is?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm from Australia, which is why I have a funny accent. I am a producer. I came over to the US 2 or 3 years ago. I produced a bunch of shows for Lionsgate Sound, basically building up their podcast arm. We did a show called Surviving El Chapo, which is about two twins who became El Chapo's right-hand men before turning on them and turning on El Chapo, and they're basically the reason El Chapo's now in prison in America. We did a show about international kleptocracy and corruption. We did a pretty massive show last year called Scamander, which was one of the biggest true crime shows in the world. We just won 2 Webby Awards. Before that, working in Australia, I came up through radio, podcasting, film, television. So I have a bit of an eclectic mix of experience. But yeah, so that's kind of very, very quickly me in the world of podcasting.
That's awesome. Did you come over here for the opportunity to work on the podcast?
I didn't specifically. I won the Green Card Lottery, which some people are familiar with and some people are not. But basically, there's a lottery every year, and some people get the chance to be an American resident. So I won that, and I came over. I got the sticker in my passport as COVID was shutting down the whole world, and so I was like, what am I going to do here? So anyway, in the end, I came over right as it was sort of in the middle of COVID, and everything was sort of half closed, half open, and it was a real kind of a weird time. But in the end, I made it work, and here I am. So it was good to get the opportunity to work with Lionsgate and
awesome. Yeah, for sure. And were you doing that already in Australia? Did you have some audio work behind your belt?
Yeah, so I was working I was working in film and TV as a kind of cinematographer and also in some sort of doing some post sound. Also working in radio and podcasting. I worked on a pretty relatively well known show in Melbourne, a morning show. on a radio station there. And so I sort of had this eclectic mix of experience. I always wanted to come to, well, I live in LA now. I always wanted to come to LA and try, I guess, my hand at being in LA, because that seems to be the thing that you do when you work in the entertainment business. And so, yeah, it all just kind of happened. And then I was like, cool, great. And then I was, initially planned to like come over and, see where I want to live and blah, blah, blah. But then obviously COVID turned everything upside down. So that didn't quite work out that way. But that's
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah, I've got a similar past with, I used to do live music, but I would also often have to use the soundboard, go over there to the PB, you're messing with knobs. And so this is before I even thought about doing podcasting. But it's crazy how you can take those small skills of even like, if you've had to ever learn how to hook up your VCR or DVD player to a TV, like things like that, it comes in handy when you start using podcasting. Yeah,
100%. And I always think like, I mean, I'm a big believer in, learn whatever skills you can because they will help you out in whatever it is that you do. And so, as you say, as a musician, like when I was a kid, I was, like playing music and that sort of thing. And that, like, I never made a proper career out of being a musician, but having a background in music, it informs you when you're putting together, say, a podcast and you're trying to figure out where to put music or things like that, how to cut music together. It informs you. So, all of the skills that you already have and that whatever skills you can build are going to help you build whatever it is that you want to do in the future anyway. So that's what I'm a big
absolutely. Believer. So what's it like working with a big production company like Lionsgate?
It's I mean, it's different to working independently or on your own, doing your own show, in good and bad ways. There's we had a lot of support that probably a lot of independent productions don't necessarily have. But the thing is at Lionsgate is our team was pretty small, and we were kind of a little bit of a upstart kind of team. So even though we sort of had this greater kind of support, it still felt in many ways like we were our own sort of little independent team putting together the shows that we did. So in a way, it was kind of the best of both worlds, and I think that's why we were able to get put together some really great shows and some really great content. So yeah,
that's awesome.
But that
what would you prefer? Like if you were to full-time go into one or the other, would it be working with a big studio like that or being an independent podcaster?
That's a good question. I think that obviously being full-time comes with its benefits and just like health insurance. But I also like a lot of my early career and mid-career was in the freelance space, and I there's something about it that is enticing to me. I don't know if it's just that you can kind of do what you want or build your own schedule or whatever it is, but there's something about it that's always like, yeah, I would rather be a freelancer. I don't really know why. And I mean, look, I'm not from these countries, so that, things like, I've only been here a couple of years. So things like, you get your health insurance, like, to me, that's like maybe once I kind of understand things a bit better, I'll be like, oh no, I definitely need health insurance. But at the moment, I'm like, freelance. I'm kind of enjoying freelance life, and there's positives and negatives to both. But I think that both are great for their own reasons. And I'm not sure that I necessarily have a preference. I'm enjoying freelancing at the moment, but other than that, I'm not sure that I have a preference necessarily.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure you learned a lot while you were working in those big studios that you carry over into what you're doing now. We were talking about before, taking your skills and sort of applying it to what you're doing, sort of carry over.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, even if you work full-time in an office doing some office job that's unrelated to broadcasting, right? You still, that's still skills that if you want to make the jump to podcasting as a freelancer or as a side hustle or even as a full-time gig, those skills are skills that help you. And I think that's, also, as a producer, like learning the business side of things, learning how, if you work in business and you know how deals get done, even if they're not in the realm of podcasting, but you're like, man, I really want to be a podcaster, having knowledge in how deals get done, how things get sold, like that is so like beneficial
Yeah.
to to doing that, because there's and I'm a creative at heart, and I think creatives, we tend to be like, oh no, we tend to kind of shy away from the whole business thing, right? And we're like, oh no, I don't want to talk about money, but learning that like you can kind of, if you're like, I want to build a creative career, right? Like learning business in some sense, you can kind of game plan your whole career, really, like you would game plan a business, and knowing how to sell yourself, knowing how to sell your show, your idea, your pitch, that's crucial, crucial skills that you need, and so if you've built them up working, say, as a salesperson for a different company, like, that's perfect.
Absolutely. And it's I would think a lot about the movie industry itself. And so it's so funny that you have this movie background and then you went into podcasting, and thinking about how Lionsgate and Paramount Pictures, they all have a podcasting arm of their business. Do you think like how how the movie industry is now, where we have your major studios, of course, you have the ones like A24 that's popping up, right? Like they're climbing the ranks and they're well received, but you have the old heads there still, some of the Paramounts, Universal, that type of film studio, and then you have your indie films. Do you think that podcasting will ever get there in that same sort of, I don't know, same sort of feel, I guess, for the as a film studios or film industry itself does now? Because it feels like if I ask 15 different people who are the famous, give me 5 famous, podcasts, every single one of them is going to give me a different answer.
Yeah, totally. Look, I think that's kind of the power of podcasting, right? That's kind of what's so great about podcasting. And I was talking about this to someone recently, in that the film industry is its own beast, and it's largely controlled by these big players and some smaller players, as you say, like A24. But the power of podcasting is that you don't have to be established, you don't have to be famous, you don't have to have done necessarily any, like, you can start a podcast in a way that you can't start making a TV show, right? If you want to make a TV show or a film, I mean, you can do it on little money, but it's going to be really, really hard, right? And really, you're probably not going to make any money off a really low budget film. It can be a good calling card. It can help your career. It can help you. If you get into festivals, you can use that to kind of leverage to get better and better work and more money for your projects. But podcasting is pretty inexpensive to get into. You need a half decent microphone, some headphones, and something to record with, right?
Yes.
And edit. And everything else is basically just about finding an audience. And if you can find an audience, and if you can make content that connects with an audience, I mean, you're kind of in control. Like, obviously you distribute via, Apple, Spotify, etc. But otherwise, you're in control. You can as I was saying, you can sell your show. You can sell sponsorships. You can get ads. You can make money without a whole bunch of capital investment necessarily. All you got to do is have something that people want to listen to, and that is really powerful. I think, like, that is something that kind of doesn't exist elsewhere. If you have something that people want to listen to, people will come, and you can turn that into a career. And that is like, it's pretty crazy, right? And it's not really anything like, and you can be in control of your own career. Like, you become your own boss, you become your own entrepreneur, right? Based around your career as a podcaster. You don't have to apply for a job. You have to sell yourself to an audience, but you don't have to sell yourself to a recruiter. It's so unique, and I think that's so amazing and powerful. And I think people, even though podcasting's been around for 15, 20 years maybe, I think we're still kind of coming to terms with understanding that about podcasts is that and you don't have to be famous to get an audience. You just have to have good content that people want to listen to, that you can kind of get people to listen to, and it doesn't require any like, you don't have to put out billboards, right? You can you can come on a show like you and I, right? We just connected over email, and here we are talking to each other, and we can share our audiences. We can, and you promote yourself for free. Basically, you can promote yourself for free and build an audience, and like it's kind of wild, and it's really one of these things that is almost like the perfect example of this new paradigm in technology and things like that we live in that can really it's like it's kind of like TikTok in a way, where you can just start doing it and you can build a career out of it for without necessarily having to spend heaps of money and that sort of thing. So
absolutely. And so your main role is a producer of a podcast, right? I think when a lot of people talk about getting into podcasting, not a lot of them think of producing as being a career path that they could take rather than being the one on the microphone, because that's always who you see, right? What are some things to keep in mind, or something that's different about being a producer? Like, what are your duties on a podcast as a producer as opposed to being a podcast host?
Yeah, sure. Well, as a producer, you basically make sure everything runs the way it needs to run, sounds the way it needs to sound, and ends up coming out of the speakers at the end the way it needs to come out, right? So really any good, there's a lot of good shows that are scrappy and just have a few people around a mic. But, the really good shows that will generally have at least a producer who works with the host and works with, to help book guests, to help prepare them for the guests that are coming on, or whatever it is that a show's doing. If it's a true crime show, it's finding people to interview and preparing the host to interview these people. You might suggest questions, things like that, and then it's pulling it all together. It's basically making sure the show runs, so that the host can just come in and do the show and as easily as possible, and then it's your job to make sure they're prepared for it, make sure the show runs well, and then take that through after the show's recorded, make sure it sounds great, make sure everything's in the right place, make sure things are trimmed so that it's a great listening experience. Some producers will also edit and do some sound design. Some will send it to an editor, but you're kind of in control of the whole thing from start to end. And generally working very, very closely with the host, because at the end of the day, it's the host's show generally. So making sure they're happy and happy with the final product. But yeah, it's kind of it's a very behind the scenes role. You generally, hopefully we'll hear at the end, this show has been produced by whoever it's been produced by. But it's not super necessarily visible role, but a very important and very crucial role, to the whole process.
Absolutely. And I haven't seen a whole lot of tools that are, being created and put out there. There's lots of them for podcasters, specifically of AI tools, especially, that are being put out there, but they're not a whole lot that are being put out for producers of podcasts, which I've noticed, which is kind of interesting and unique to that position.
Yeah, I wish more people would put out more tools, because it would make my life easier. But unfortunately, look, I use Descript a lot, because it's kind of one of the few tools that I've been able to find that kind of is great for podcasters, but also can be used as a producer. But I kind of end up, across, like, I've got a different tool for calendars. I've got a different tool for tasks. I've got a different tool for, writing. I've got a different tool for editing. Like, it really, you end up with so many different accounts across so many different, like, tools and things. So, if there's someone out there who's who wants to make a tool for producers, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. You and I met at Podcast Movement in LA a few weeks ago.
Yes.
And that was an awesome event. Incredible. It was my first time in LA.
Yeah,
I know you live there, so you're pretty used to it. So it was a lot of fun. I was surprised by a lot of things I've heard. And then I guess it'd be the same thing if you came to Arkansas. Like you hear some things and then you come here and you experience it. You're like, that's a little bit different than what I thought it was going to be. So I really enjoyed my time there and learned so much from being around some of the industry pros that were there and some of the people that were creating services specifically for podcasters and podcast producers. And, going behind the scenes in some of these, workout or these breakout sessions and workshops. What were some of the big takeaways for you for that? Did you learn anything huge that you took away that sort of changed the way that you do your part?
I think for me, the biggest thing was like, and I think a lot of creatives just generally, we have this sort of like imposter syndrome where it doesn't matter whether you could work on like the tiniest little show or you could work on a, massive, you could work on Spielberg's latest film, right? And you still like, oh, am I really, do I really know what I'm doing? Oh, am I really supposed to be here? Is this really, and I think for me, and that's, again, podcast is unique in this sense in that there's so many people from so many different backgrounds, so many different parts of the world, doing it and doing it well and making money and building a career. And so to me, I sort of arrived there and, there was obviously so much going on and so much to learn and so many different, skills and things that you could pick up. But the one major takeaway I think for me is that like, the community is so welcoming and you automatically feel like you belong. Right. And so this idea of like, oh, am I really supposed to be here? Like kind of goes away because everyone's, and everyone's like, oh my God, it doesn't matter what you're doing. That's amazing, right? Like what you're doing is great and just keep doing it. And, et cetera, that I think we have a really, great community in the podcasting world. And everyone is super supportive. And so I think this idea of like this imposter syndrome has started to like kind of dissipate because it's like, oh, yes, we all belong here, right? We all belong. It doesn't matter what you're doing. We all belong here. So, I think that was really a big takeaway for me. But, there was obviously, as you say, so much and, big shows, small shows, all kind of, lifting the lid on their processes. And I think that it was fascinating also to kind of, look at some of the shows and go, oh, that's kind of what I do. So again, it's that like idea of like, you belong and you're not kind of just doing something weird and in a way that no one knows and no one understands. It's like, oh yeah, that's we do that too,
Yeah, absolutely. It sort of changed the way that I was sort of seeing, a lot of the different, podcasters as far as like who are the big ones and like, and who are some of the people that you look up to and getting to meet some of those people that I've listened to their podcasts and be like, oh, everybody's just sort of, you're doing your thing. Somebody asked me yesterday, they were like, oh, you're into podcasting. You have an organization about podcasting. It helps. Is to give me the 5 top things that people make mistakes on when they're first getting started that they could, go back and fix if they could. And I was like, those 5 things really just boil down to one thing. And it's exactly what you said. It's that imposter syndrome. Like that barrier to entry is yourself. People think, oh, there's not going to be an audience for me. I'm not going to be right. And then like, I get it. Like when you can plan your podcast as much as possible, but when you get behind the microphone, you start questioning everything in life. You freeze up. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. You're like, oh my God, is this, and are people going to like this? Are people going to listen to this? No one wants to hear me talk, So I think that, and that's huge. You're like your biggest barrier is yourself, as you say. And I think going to a show like, Podcast Movement, it kind of dissipates that, but also, and I think it doesn't matter who you are, right? Like you connect with people. Obviously connecting with like someone like Steven Spielberg, you're like, oh my God, he's never going to talk to me, right? But even if you go on LinkedIn, right, and you see, I don't know, the head of the company that you really want to work for, you're like, oh, I can't, oh, they're not going to want to talk to me. Oh, of course, like, why would they talk to me? They're not going to, whatever. You go to this show, you meet that person in person, and you're like, oh, they're just a person like me, and they're just happy to chat to me. Of course, like that makes sense, but it kind of sometimes you need that like in-person thing to be like, oh, of course they're just a person just like me. They're not like some person that I couldn't ever speak to about anything because they're so high up and whatever. So I think that it's such a it seems so simple, but I think it's really kind of an important element of what a show like that does. But you're right, and that's I think if you're starting a show, just start doing it, and then you don't even have to put like record 5 episodes,
Yes.
right? If you think about the top 5 mistakes, do 5 episodes and then
Right.
listen to them back and then go, oh, okay, and then by the time you get 5 episodes in, firstly, you're going to feel way more confident. Secondly, you're gonna have more of an idea of actually what you want to talk about and what you want to get to. And thirdly, you're gonna and not just record them, but listen to them back, listen to the way you sound, right? And you'll start to edit, and you'll go, okay, well, we don't need this, we don't need that, and then it just sort of starts to become, second nature in the sense of like, okay, being a bit more focused. And I think everyone has to make all of their mistakes, right? Like you can't say, oh, what's the 5 mistakes that you make? Because you just have to make them. You just have to do it, right? You have to do it. You have to make the mistakes. And you have to go, oh shit, there is not a single show out there that if you listen to the first episode that they ever put out and the latest episode that they put out, that's not like almost an entirely different show. So you just got to get out there and do it. But as you say, the biggest obstacle is just yourself, and just get over it and just do it.
Awesome. Well, this has been great, Jaxson. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and to share your time and your wisdom and to talk about, the podcast industry itself and where we're at. So it's really helpful for people, and then adds value to the listeners, of course. People that are going to the podcast festival this year, everyone's looking to have those answers, those questions answered for them, of like how to get started, where to grow. And like, so you just answered a few of those with the, production side. What is that like versus being a podcaster and putting your show together? And it's been awesome. Where can people find you online if they want to follow some of your content?
Probably currently the best place is just LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. It's just my name. I'm currently kind of going through and redoing my socials and my website because I just haven't been bothered to do it for so long, and now I'm like, all right, fine, I've got to do it. So anyway. Reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect with me there. I'm not scary. I won't be like, oh no, I don't want to talk to you. Just add me. I'll talk to you. Whatever. Ask me whatever you want to ask me. If there's something that you're like, oh, hey, how do you do what you do, or how do I get into doing what you do? Just I'm there. I'm around. Just hit me up. So LinkedIn's probably the easiest, and
that's been another incredible thing about the podcasting community itself is that everybody's just so open to share, and there's hardly any gatekeepery that I've sort of encountered, and everybody's they're so freely given. Hey, come here. You might learn how to do this. Let's sit down and have some coffee. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, I think there's it's hard because I think there's also a lot of there's not a lot of formal education you can do on podcasting, right? So for me, I'm like, well, I'll help you out. I'll teach you what I know, and go and make something great. Like please go and make something great.
Awesome, that's a t-shirt. Please make something great.
I'm gonna get t-shirts, mate.
That's your new branding while you're doing your socials and your website. Yeah. There it is. You found it. I'm glad we made this so worth it for you. All right, Jaxson. Absolutely.
Thanks for having me
so much.
Thanks again to Jaxson for jumping on for the pod and being willing to be interviewed and to talk about his craft and to talk about his personal experience and journey. We really appreciate Jaxson coming on, and hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you have, please leave a good review. Please give us a 5-star rating only. And you know what? I'll settle for 4. It's okay. But this is a 5-star, just so you know. In the back of your mind, even if you give us a 4, in the back of your mind, it's a 5. You gotta give it a 5, and then your guilt will kick in, and then later you'll come back and you'll hit that 5th star, and then you'll feel better about yourself and have a milkshake or something. September 14th, don't forget, we are coming to Little Rock for the annual podcast festival called ARKAST. Full day of speakers, breakout sessions, hands-on tutorials, meetups, and all sorts of things. And then October 16th, Rob Robinson Theater, Little Rock, and we will be having a live Halloween podcast recording. And then November 14th through the 16th, we will be in Fayetteville. At the event center at the library there, starting off with the ARKAST Awards, where we will be handing out awards voted by you, the people, of the best of podcasting across the South, the flyover states, whatever you want to call this region. I'm not really sure because it includes, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee, all the ones that are around us in this area. If you have not submitted your podcast to be considered yet, you can go to arkansaspodcasters.org. Also, voting will be going on pretty soon because we'll be shutting down those polls. And it's pretty exciting. And then for the next 2 days after the ARKAST Awards, it is just full days of honing your craft of podcasting and learning from other people, learning about funding possibilities for your podcast, grant funding for your podcast. Speaking of which, we just did a workshop on grant funding for your podcast and how that works and what our role is that we play in it as Arkansas Podcast Collaborative. So give that a look, listen to it on our YouTube channel, ARKAST. And is there anything else? I'm supposed to be asking you to do something else. I'm not really sure. Just go to arkansaspodcasters.org and you can find everything there. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Subscribe. That was it. Subscribe.